So, hi everyone, and welcome to our latest Tree Talk. At Tree, we strongly believe in professional growth, and so we often host these events and talks for our community of schools and teachers. And today we'll be addressing a topic that is on most people's minds right now, and that is the future of AI in education. AI has, of course, been around for a really long time, but what we imagined only in sci fi movies or scientists working in top secret labs has not only become very, very real, but also very accessible to virtually everyone on the planet. And so this has the potential to cause seismic shifts in every aspect of our lives, in how we work, our productivity, and especially our education system. So, for today's conversation, we're really excited to have Mr. Greg Clinton share his perspectives on the role of AI in education. So, Greg is the Director of Technologies and Research and Development at the American International School in Chennai. Prior to his current position, Greg taught literature and philosophy at Colegio Franklin Delano Roosevelt in Lima, Peru, Stony Brook University in New York, and American Embassy School in New Delhi, as well as schools in Khartoum, Sudan, and Tokyo. He holds a master's degree in philosophy from Catholic University. Yeah, I don't know if I'm saying that, pronouncing it right. In Belgium, and a PhD in comparative literary and cultural studies from Stony Brook University. He is one of the founding members of an AI in Education collaborative with membership spanning the globe, and is the leader of the Near East South Asia Council of Overseas Schools virtual school project. So, Greg, thank you so much for being here with us today. I think as the tech director at AIC, you have a unique position to have expertise with AI, particularly with context to schools and education. So let's dive right into it. What does the future of AI in education look like to you?
It's a great question. Thank you for inviting me. This is a topic that we are grappling with, like most educators are, and that I've been thinking a lot about for the past year or so. So I've got a few slides here that I want to share, and let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, good. So yeah, putting the answers to this question into this form helps me kind of organize my thoughts because there are so many things to say, and I know we have a short time. So what I thought would be useful for people, and frankly for myself, is to to think about the answer to the question about what the effect AI is going to have on education in terms of different scenarios that we can imagine. And so I'm gonna tell three stories. One story where AI is going to make a much better world in terms of educating students. Another story where AI is going to make things a lot worse. And then another story where AI makes things a little bit weird. And I also want to point out that my email address is on this slide. And if there's anybody who views this that wants to get in touch with me and continue this conversation, I would love that. I'd welcome it. Okay, so on to the stories. This story is that things are going to get much better. So what do I imagine when I think things are going to get better? Well, the truth is that right now we have a new cognitive tool at our disposal. Like you said in your introduction, these are things that were normally buried behind corporate workflows and things like that, but now they're accessible to middle school students or high school students. And so to that end, we have new tools for cognition, for learning, and that can only improve student outcomes. In particular, we have access to data analysis now that used to be you had to have a computer science degree or a data science degree in order to do large data analyses, but AI makes it accessible again to very young people. We have a thinking partner available to us that can look a lot of different ways. It can look like someone who counsels us on our relationships. It can look like someone who counsels us on our learning, provides some sort of strategies for our research. And the truth is, things are going to get better because what we're realizing is that there's a long-standing problem in education, which is how do we get the benefit of a one-to-one tutoring situation and scale it to everybody? Back in the 80s, Harold Bloom, who's famous for Bloom's taxonomy, right, of questioning, um, he he wrote a paper and he pointed out this problem, which is the two sigma problem, is sort of referred to a lot, especially now that AI has come out, which is that if you educate a student one-to-one in a tutoring situation, they will perform up to 2 standard deviations better than a student who's educated in a classroom. But of course, we don't have enough teachers to make that possible. The promise of AI is that we will, that we do, that these AI systems can be improved to the point where they really are providing personalized tutoring at scale. And I don't know about you or about anyone who's watching this, but you know, for educators, that is a thrilling prospect. I think in the United States, in our public education system, our class size has grown larger over time. Teachers are it's a huge challenge to provide differentiated learning for every student, and I imagine the same thing is true in India. And so, yeah, the idea of personalized tutoring at scale is the holy grail of AI, and that's going to happen. Let's in this story, in this scenario, that's going to happen. That's why it's so thrilling. Um, but this is not the only story we could tell, and I think we should tell this story too. This is that because of AI, things are going to get much worse for students and for teachers. And what is this story? In my mind, this story is about the disconnect between writing and thinking. So I used to teach literature, I used to teach writing, and it used to be the case that writing is a kind of proxy for thinking. So I could read a student's written work and I could think, okay, well, they haven't organized their ideas very well. That means in their own mind, their ideas aren't very well organized. But now that AI can just sort of generate things in an organized fashion, I can dump all of my disorganized thinking in terms of like in a note form into the AI, and it will spit out this beautifully organized thought. That means there's no longer a way to assess a student's thinking in terms of their writing. And so I think that that's worse. I think, you know, writing is a form of thinking. And if students aren't being taught how to write as deeply or as skillfully, then that is a loss. That is a problem. The other problem, of course, is that assessment doesn't work, right? So you can't assign the same kinds of homework assignments. You can't say, you know, go research a topic and write it and then bring it back to me and have that be a useful assessment. It just doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of domains where ChatGPT and other different AI systems are outperforming humans in, you know, even in very difficult exam situations, medical exams, entrance exams for, you know, top universities or professions. AI can ace those assessments. So assessment doesn't work, and that's another problem because, you know, obviously we have to figure out how students are doing, how they're growing, where they need help, et cetera. And so if assessment doesn't work, then that's going to be worse for them. Um, and I think just in general, if students use or rely on AI, if they outsource their thinking, then they will lose opportunities to practice, and that will just mean that they are not as skilled at critical thinking or at research, and those are key things we want to pass on to them. So overall, in this scenario, AI is going to make education worse because it's going to rob them of opportunities to practice, and it's going to rob us of opportunities to understand where the students are. Okay, so that's the worst scenario. The I prefer the better scenario. I'm an optimist. I think, you know, Kevin Kelly, he's a famous futurist, and he was the founding editor of Wired magazine. He's a really interesting guy, and he said something like, "The future belongs to the optimists." Um, and in a way, it has to be true, right? Because no change occurs without a belief that the change is possible, and that is optimism. So um, I am an optimist, and yet we have to be pragmatic. We know that AI is going to start breaking things and making things worse unless we're thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of good and bad. Uh, and then I think we also have to be humble. A lot of people at my school turn to me for answers. They're saying, what's going to happen? How do I deal with this? Um, you know, what are the steps I need to take? And my answer is, I don't know. And it's not that I'm, negligent or I haven't figured it out yet. It's like nobody knows. And nobody knows at a deep level. That's a little bit disturbing because, even the people who are creating ChatGPT, they don't know why ChatGPT says what it says. They can't explain, why it's so good at doing certain things. They can't predict when it will become better at doing certain things. So all of those, those medical entrance exams that it was passing, no one predicted that it was going to do that. So things are going to get weird, and I think this one is just probably true. We have to be humble. We don't know how things are going to get weird, but if I had to imagine this one, weirdness in this story means things are going to change in unexpected ways. And some people will see this as good, and some people will see this as bad. Um, However you see it, it's going to be strange. I think teachers are not going to have the same status in this weird world of AI. And I think that is important for teachers to recognize. If we go back to the good scenario where there's personalized learning for every student, well, then what is the teacher? The teacher has a different role to play in that story. Yusuf Harari, who's the author of a number of different books, but the one I read most recently was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And he makes a point really clearly in that book. Um, it's kind of obvious, but it's worth just saying again, because before the internet, the purpose of school was to provide students with information because information was scarce. You couldn't just Google something and learn about it. You had to go to some special place, you had to open some special book. And so what was scarce was information, and school gave students that. That was valuable. But after the internet, and especially now in the age of AI, information is not scarce. There's too much information. What's scarce is the ability to decide what is the important information and what is not the important information. So what's scarce is critical thought. And so the purpose of education now has to be giving students critical thinking skills. It's not about imparting information. That's sort of weird for a lot of teachers, especially, teachers of a certain age where the tradition has always been, I need to give my students all of this content. I need to give them all of this information so that they can, pass some exam. Information is valuable, but even more valuable, I think, is the ability to discern what's important and what's not. And that's only going to accelerate. And so teachers are just going to have to grapple with this strange new status that they have. I think that the internet is another good analogy. When the internet first popped up in education, people were saying very similar things. They were saying, oh, this is going to ruin students because it'll make them stupider. There's a famous Google, yeah, Google will make us dumber or something like that, right? That's the idea that if we're not encouraged to memorize things, then we won't have that same ability and we will just become stupider over time. But now in my school, at least, and in a lot of different educational settings, use of the internet is not just normal, it's expected. You have to do it. If you're not researching on the internet, what are you doing? You know, um, if you're not using the internet to collaborate with people, then yeah, it's sort of like get with it, right? Like that's the expectation now. So I think AI and human collaboration is going to become like that in this weird story where you're not working with an AI to accomplish some big task. Why not? Like that seems like such a lost opportunity. Um, and that's going to be weird. Right now, people don't know how to behave with AI. They're not even sure if it's like legal or ethical. But very soon in the future, that's going to be sort of an expectation. And I think the biggest thing that educators are going to have to figure out how to deal with is the fact that school is just going to look different. We're not going to have um, it's not going to be as sacred a space as it was, and some people are going to find that unnerving. They're not going to like the fact that a brick and mortar school isn't a sacred space anymore. That will just disperse, right? Learning will be so non-localized. I don't know how else to put it except that uh, all of those things we see in virtual learning, in this conversation we're having online, which has become very normal, in the past was not normal. That same kind of pressure is going to happen in schools in general, and you can see it happening already, but AI is just going to sort of accelerate that to the point where I can see a future not too far away where a student might go through a significant portion of their education and never need a teacher per se. Maybe they have a mentor, right? Maybe schools become like mentorship programs where you have a guide, an advisor, but all of your teachers are just like these brilliant AI bots, right? That could easily be the case very soon. So those are the three stories I was thinking about, and they're really just about things are going to get better. That is true. Things are going to get worse. That's also true. Um, Things are going to get weird. That's where all the questions are, and we just have to be flexible and ready.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic way to put it because you're right. There is no one answer to where the future might go. It could be one of these. It could be a combination of all of these. And so I think this is definitely given us new ways to think about it. I want to go into what you said about the role of the teacher because I find that very, very interesting, especially when you go to the better scenario and how certainly, yes, AI can assist with differentiation and, at a level that a teacher would not be able to in a class of 20 or 30 kids. Um, and what you said about the teacher then developing into the role of a mentor or a guide, do you think that essentially there are skills that teachers need to have in order to move into that role, or how do you see the role of a teacher then evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're touching on a question that I actually prepared an answer to. I'm going to skip forward to this.
Yeah.
Um, so the question is sort of like, what can teachers do to prepare for this new role that they're taking on, right? Um, and and also to understand where AI is going so that they can kind of predict maybe what their role is going to be.
Yeah.
And my answer is that now is the time, whether you think the story is that education is going to get better, worse, or weirder, uh, it doesn't really matter which one occurs. Now is the time for educators to become experts in this technology, to understand it at a deep level. Um, and to add to that, uh, what's the difference between a teacher mentor and a content level expert? Um, I think, part of teaching is understanding how to manage change. We're really just change managers. That's what we are. Our students come to us in a certain state, and we want to manage them to change in some way so that at the end of the course or the year or whatever, they're different. So understanding, you know, adolescent psychology, development, social emotional skills, those are going to be more and more important, even for someone who considers themselves a content level expert. And I bet everybody who listens to this, who's an adult who went to university, will remember a teacher at university who wasn't a very good teacher, who was a brilliant content level, like maybe one of the most brilliant people you've ever met in your life, but was a terrible teacher who would stand there and just talk at you and then walk out of the room or whatever. Everyone's had that experience, especially at the high levels. And that's because university teachers aren't really taught how to teach.
Yeah.
That's not kind of the thing that that they value almost. You get that sense anyway. So yeah, I think a mentor is going to have to be a really skilled social emotional practitioner, but expertise in the AI stuff is important right now. So for example, every teacher should be able to talk about the difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. Every teacher should understand what code interpreter is. It's an incredible development, but it's hidden behind a paywall. So actually, the only thing on this list here that costs money right now is that second one, ChatGPT Code Interpreter. It's part of the subscription model, but everything else is free. So the difference between how Bing is Microsoft's search bot, whatever, how Bing behaves in precise mode versus creative mode. Teachers should know this because students are going to be starting to use it, and there are opportunities for research that they present. There are two tools I think that are absolutely phenomenal implementations of AI for student facing stuff. One's called Perplexity and one's called elicit.org. And they're both research tools. Perplexity is almost like a search engine, but it's like a search engine with a brilliant AI sort of wrapper. It gives all of these different precise links. It summarizes things for you. You can have whole conversations about different sources. And Elicit is it's an AI tool for searching a huge scientific database on all sorts of research questions. It can help students craft a research question. So maybe they're interested in some topic. Elicit uses AI to help a student kind of hone the question that they're asking to get better results from the database. So it's all based in real factual information. That's one of the things that, if we look at the bad story, things are going to get worse because AI makes things up all the time. By the way, please verify the information that comes out of an AI model because it could very well be just made up. But Perplexity and Elicit are using AI on data sets that are verified. So, they're really great tools. I would encourage teachers to check those out. And then, of course, you have to read. I mean, even a month ago, the things I'm talking about here didn't even exist, So you have to sort of keep current in reading. There are two authors I think are important to get a range of ideas from. One is Ethan Mollick. He's a professor at the Wharton School in the United States. He teaches about entrepreneurship and business, but he's very into tinkering with AI tools for teaching. And he is an optimist. He's a strong optimist. Gary Marcus is a psychologist, neuroscientist, former professor. He's an author. He's a strong pessimist. He thinks this AI stuff's just overblown. It's not going to change anything. They're actually dumb machines, et cetera, et cetera. So it's useful to read both those authors and others like them, just to kind of understand where the thinking is going. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and this is a fantastic list of resources, I think, for our teachers to explore. Do you have any examples of how teachers can use these tools, whether it's planning or teaching? Do you have any ideas?
Sure. So I'll just stop sharing my screen here. Yeah, so a couple of things are happening at our school right now, where we're answering that question. We've formed a kind of a task force of volunteer faculty and administrators, and we're also involving some high school students. And our purpose is to figure out if AI is going to be a strategic concern for the school, or if it's more like operational. And I mean, like, are we just going to change our academic policies to incorporate AI and then move on, just keep doing what we were doing? Or is it going to be, much more of a strategic change that we have to make? Like, how we teach, what courses look like, etc. So we're just trying to answer that question because we don't know the answer. I mean, like that guy Gary Marcus says, this is all overblown. It's not going to make the change that everyone expects it to. That could be the answer. But so what we're doing is the first project that we're going to work on is we're going to create a prompt library. And what that's going to look like is basically teachers are going to go into ChatGPT and GPT-4. We're going to invest some resources in getting that upgrade so that we can practice with the best available model. Teachers are going to go into ChatGPT and prompt it for different reasons. Like, for example, first of all, you tell the AI what you want it to be. Like, you are an expert in climate science. I am going to give you an argument about what I think is happening in India over the past 10 years, and I'm going to give you some data. And I want you to debate me. I want you to refute all the things that I'm telling you very respectfully. And we're going to have an exchange where you disagree with me on basically everything. And the purpose would be to force a student to hone their thinking, right? They might be convinced of something, but now they have a tool to kind of refute it, to force it to become stronger, basically. And that's not something that you can scale. Like, you can't have a teacher can't have one-on-one conferences with every single student using that. But what we're going to do is we're going to craft that prompt, like telling the AI how to behave, and then we're going to save it in a document. And then we're going to offer that opportunity for students or teachers to incorporate that into their lessons and say, oh, you want a debate prompt? Here's a good one. Do you want a prompt that helps a student craft a research question? Here's one thing to do. So we're going to create a whole library of these, and I think that's going to be really useful for teachers and students. The other thing we want to do with our task force is keep it out in the open. I didn't say this about what can school leaders do, but I think it's important that schools don't criminalize the use of AI. If you do that, it's a choice. You could do that. But if you do that, what's going to happen is people are going to use it anyway. And you can't stop it because it's free. So people are going to use it anyway, and then they're going to keep it hidden, and you're not going to know about it. And detection is impossible. Please, I mean, I don't know how strongly I can say it because I'm not exactly sure, but all the evidence I can see suggests that detecting AI writing is not possible. It's not. So we're not using any AI detection tools to make decisions about student work at all, because it turns up too many false positives. So keep it out in the open and let people experiment. That's where the value is going to be. Let students experiment with it. How good? Like, my question would be something like, what's it going to look like if we require AI? That guy Ethan Malik, he has a really good assignment at the end of one of his courses. He says, before you leave this course, you have to do something impossible. I think it's called the impossible assignment. If you don't know how to code, you have to use AI to code some working piece of software. If you don't know how to do data science, you have to use AI to do some sophisticated data analysis. And I think that's sort of brilliant because it forces you to tinker and to find where the limits are. So I would say creating prompt libraries is a very useful step. Policies that encourage experimentation rather than discourage it is also a very useful step. Aside from just trying to use the tools yourself, I found that's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, no, and that's a really innovative way of looking at it, because we did have a couple of community questions that where teachers were concerned about students using AI sort of counterproductively to do their homework assignments for them, and that was concerning. But as you said, there is no way to detect it, and the tools are only going to get more and more sophisticated, and kids are going to figure out ways to beat the system anyway. So I think maybe it's the nature of the assignments itself that have to change, and where we're testing other skills. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, um, given that, because you did talk about critical thinking and you spoke about writing and a lot of things, um, when we do embrace AI as part of teaching and learning, what do you see as essential skills that students are going to need um, while adopting AI into their learning? Do you see that evolving? And what do you think would be most important?
So the first thing that I guess surfaced for us in our conversations was the need, if detection was impossible, um, the need to partner with students as ethical people, becomes bigger. It becomes a bigger deal. I think a sense of values, like what's important when you come to school, what matters. That sense of intrinsic motivation and the desire to learn, I think is yeah, it's an increasing necessity. I mean, school systems, we all know this. I'm not going to say anything controversial because school systems do kind of funnel students into a certain way of being and acting, right? I mean, uh, even just something like a test, right? You sit and you have to be quiet. You can't talk to anybody, right? And you have to, pick the right answer, and it has to fill in a little bubble or whatever, which is fine as an assessment model. But we have to admit, it's a certain way of being that actually in the future as an adult, you almost never have to do that. Like I literally can't remember the last time I had to take an exam. Maybe fill out a form, you do a lot of that, but taking an exam, no. In fact, I always collaborate with people. I'm always trying to gather people together and figure out solutions to problems. So, school tends to have that kind of funnel effect. And asking the question, this is what's so great about AI. It's like asking the question, what's valuable at school is, I guess, not a skill. It's just an important moment, for us as educators and for kids to be really mindful of what matters. Uh, I had a conversation with our Model United Nations Club recently because they were very concerned, that their MUN delegates were going to be using ChatGPT to create resolutions or something like that. And rightfully so, because I had to ask the question, well, what is valuable about MUN? Like what are you proud of doing in this club? And why does it matter? And I think they had really good answers, and those are the first questions we have to ask. So a sense of values, a sense of ethics, a sense of what's right in what situation, what will help themselves and what will help other people. On a practical level, how to talk to the AI. Like, I remember early on when ChatGPT came out, we were putting in essay prompts. Like the teachers were saying, "Can it write an essay that I'm asking my students to write?" And so we would just sort of paste the essay prompt in, and it would spit something out. And frankly, it wasn't that good. It was okay. It was remarkable that a computer was doing it, but it wasn't good enough to, get an A or pass or whatever. But very quickly, people started learning that if you talk to the AI in a certain way, it will dramatically increase the quality of the output. So if you do the things I was suggesting, like tell it is an expert in some field, um, give it some context for what you're doing. I am a technology director at a school. I'm trying to come up with a strategy for AI adoption. I am going to be meeting with 7 faculty members across disciplines and 3 students. I need help thinking about a structure for discussion or whatever. So if you give it very specific context and very specific background, the quality improves dramatically. So I think learning how to talk to these systems is actually pretty useful in the short term. In the long term, the systems are going to improve so quickly that we won't need that skill. I think in the future, we're not going to really need it. We can just it will know enough about who we are. I don't know if you've seen the movie Her. It's about this guy who falls in love with his computer. And his computer already knows all about him, right? And it's got all the data. I think that's going to actually start to happen. It's kind of it's kind of unnerving. I'm not sure I want it to happen, but it will start to happen so that you can just go to a computer and talk to it and won't need a lot of context. But
Yeah, yeah. No, and absolutely, I think knowing what prompts to give, that itself is a skill that you need to have. And I think it's probably also one way to look at it is not approach it with that kind of hostile, okay, what is AI gonna replace or take away from students, but rather think of it as it's freeing up their time. Like if AI is going to be taking care of certain skills, then what else can schools do? What else can teachers do? And
absolutely.
there's
That's
this.
so that's so good. I totally agree with that. I mean, the MUN example is perfect because I don't know if you've ever done an MUN debate or whatever, but one of the things you have to do is write a UN style resolution. And it is this very specific formatting thing with like, very specific kinds of clauses in the, preamble and the whatever, operative clauses. It's got to be formatted. It's such a pain. It's such a waste of time. It's not real in the sense that it doesn't change the ideas. It just kind of is this form. Now, if you put ideas into ChatGPT, my idea is that the United States, oh, so I'm an MUN delegate. You're an expert on geopolitics. Uh, my idea is that the United States would do this and that India would do this and that we would resolve to do these kinds of things. Format it in an MUN resolution, please, ChatGPT, and it does a brilliant job. So then you don't have to spend an hour formatting. You're spending an hour talking about it, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And beyond just MUN, I mean, I know professional like lawyers who actually get AI to draft they put in the information and it sends out the drafts or the briefs, and it's
Yeah,
knows what
it's
the.
incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally incredible. I would say as a tip to people who aren't super experienced with ChatGPT yet, you can tell it to output the answer however you want. So the earlier ones were like, explain neuroscience to me, but in the style of a pirate, right? So then it would say, "Ah, well, the gray matter, etc." So it would rewrite everything in the style of a pirate. You can do the same thing and say, output it in a table, and
Yeah,
it will put it into a table, or output it like an outline, or output it like a this or that. That's a useful kind of technique I found.
yeah, yeah. No, that's yeah, it's just mind-boggling, really. And uh, yeah, I know that, typically education and schools are the slowest to really experience any kind of change. But do you think there's some sort of trickle down that needs to happen in order for AI to be fully adopted and embraced, just at a bigger level?
Yeah. Well, like we can answer that question from different altitudes, I suppose. Governments are going to have interesting reactions to AI, and they already are. You can see them kind of maneuvering, information that is generated from an AI is difficult to control. So there are some governments who are very nervous about that. They want to control certain kinds of information, and it may make it more difficult, which could be good for some people and bad for other people. Um, in particular, I know in the United States we're very sensitive to misinformation and its effect on our politics, and that's starting to become true in a lot of different countries. Probably the same in India and in other places. So I think governments are going to have to figure out how to regulate it effectively. Schools, um, I tell my principals, I'm like, guys, well, people, sorry, people, you can't uh, you can't script this. You have to let the users figure out how to do it because they're the ones that are going to figure out how it affects them. Students are going to have to figure out how it benefits them. Teachers, same. So, the guidelines that we're setting are important, right? There are certain ethical boundaries that we feel we shouldn't be crossing. There are values that we want to uphold, but beyond that, it really has to kind of come from below in a way. So I think the first step would be to just identify the values that you don't want to betray or lose, and then within that, allow people to experiment and make mistakes too. I mean, I think we're going to have to make a lot of mistakes on the way to the good story.
Yeah. That's true. And so one last question, I think,
Sure.
if you had to give advice to school leaders or schools as a system, just to how to think about an approach to adopt AI, what would you tell them? And I know the point that you just said was fantastic. So yeah, what would you leave them with?
I would leave them uh, with some sympathy, because I know I know that it is a sort of scary moment when you lose a little bit of control over what's about to happen. But it's really necessary to lose that control. Like I was just saying, it's like yeah. So our jobs, I think, right now as leaders is to empower the safe and responsible experimentation with these tools in the hands of people who are eager to use them. Um, and part of that is to, not criminalize it, to embrace it in certain ways, and then to allow people to share what they learn. I mean, I think if it stays in the shadows, I might learn something really powerful and useful, and then I will never tell anyone about it, because I don't want anyone to know that I was using this tool that's been outlawed or whatever. So I think just creating the space for people to share what they've learned, and also then to encourage that safe and responsible experimentation it's the approach we're taking here. Um, I don't think it's wrong also to kind of build the walls higher, keep what you've got, because every school does incredible things and they don't want to lose all the incredible things that they've built. I think that's also very reasonable, as long as you recognize that the waters are rising. So like we can either keep building the walls higher, or we can learn how to swim. I don't know what the metaphor is, but yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah. And that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, Greg. I think with all of the examples that you gave and the ideas, I think you've left us with so much to think about. And I really hope that our viewers have enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you're left feeling optimistic rather than
Yes.
pessimistic about the future of AI.
Yes, be an optimist. Yes. Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And of course, we will be sharing the resources that Greg talked about, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions. So thank you.